Hi, and welcome to the show. My name is Ken Moore, and this is Local Matters. And I am delighted and honored to have with me today Chief Matt Scales of the McMinnville Police Department. Matt, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, my pleasure, Ken. My pleasure.
Well, I did a little homework, and I saw your statement to the City Council at the June 9th City Council meeting about how you're addressing this, the protests that have been happening, what's needed. And I was very moved by the statement. I just remember what you said, we will do better.
Right. Yeah, we
And
have.
can you tell a little bit about maybe what you're thinking when you said that?
Well, my statement is pretty clear in that we need to do better, but more importantly, as a profession, we need to have the courage and the wherewithal to step out and when something is done and it's publicly known and we're aware of it, be able to have the guts to step into this problem and condemn something that historically our profession has sort of remained silent on. So that was important for me to acknowledge to our citizens and to the council and candidly to our profession. I do believe that we need to do better as a profession. There's things that we can do better as a profession. I know that there's going to be things happening in Salem. There's going to be things happening at the federal level, but by and large, as a profession, we need to lean into these problems. Don't hide behind that sort of wall of silence, like we didn't know, we didn't see it, we weren't there. And when it's obvious, specifically in this Minneapolis incident, that it's our duty to stand with the citizens and condemn it at that point and make our feelings known that we are on the right side of history.
All right. Well, my show is called Local Matters. I kind of want to bring it home. We're not going to solve the country's problems today and Minneapolis's problems, but I think people locally are looking to you now. Is that right? Have you felt a little bit more scrutiny lately?
Oh, I've felt a great deal of scrutiny. I don't sleep a whole ton right now, about the last month or so, but people do come and they will raise their concerns. And so they have looked to the police department, the police chief, and the city as a whole, to hopefully find some solutions to some of these issues that our country's in and maybe some of our citizenry are feeling. So yeah, I do feel the weight of it.
Well, I appreciate you bearing it and addressing it the way you are. There are a lot of questions that have been raised around the country that I just kind of like ask about what's going on locally. People are asking a lot about police training in light of maybe this need for greater understanding of cultural differences and implicit bias. What's going on with MacPD?
So first of all, at the state level, our officers that are coming from the academy already receive a great deal of training with respect to diversity, inclusivity, that sort of thing. And this is one of the things, Ken, that I think that MacPD needs to be better at, candidly, is going into those robust discussions and bringing in robust training where our staff has the ability to listen and understand, what other cultures or other races or ethnicities are feeling. We've had implicit bias training. We have an annual review of our policies that discusses about how we will police without bias. But candidly, again, that's something that I need to do a better job as the chief and as the leader of this organization, connecting with the trainers that are willing to come in, provide that expertise and that knowledge base that we sort of have historically lacked. So that's one of my initiatives, and that's some of the discussions I've already had with some of our community leaders and some of actually just some citizenry that are willing to help out and provide that expertise to us. So at a state level, it happens. It happens. We have policies on it, but we can do a tremendous amount of training and understanding, and again, closing our mouths and opening our ears to hearing people's stories. We had a great training session with Unidos a couple years ago where they brought in a panel. We did some implicit bias training. That was great. But the training that stuck with me the most, and candidly probably our staff the most, was listening to the stories of some of the Latinx community that had come to Oregon and how they got here and some of the challenges they've faced to within, the uncertain times, both politically and just ensuring that their families are safe. So that's some of the best training that we've had. And candidly, again, I need to ensure that we're bringing that sort of depth of training to the PD all the time, every year.
I'm hearing there was some compassion raised for these people in a way that maybe you hadn't felt before.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't know everybody's stories. We want to broad brush, paint somebody in whatever we sort of see. But until you know the history of somebody, until you know the background, I mean, everybody's got a story, everybody's got a financial situation that they're dealing with. And it's important for us to, again, listen to those stories and understand uh, different different cultures and what they've gone through and what they feel. We need to be a part of that, and dive into those deeper discussions.
That's great. I want to flip that around a little bit and talk about when an officer arrives at a scene, the people there may be wondering, how's he or she doing right now? Is this person under a lot of stress? And how would I know not to worry?
Right.
And so that kind of falls back on psychological testing, to use a term. Are your officers okay? And how is that done? Is that up to you to figure out if somebody's stressed or not?
It is. It's inherently up to us. I will, just going back to when we bring somebody on board, we're digging deep into their backgrounds through a in-depth background investigation, but also they're going to a clinical psychologist and they're doing basically, 5 or 6 hours of testing and discussing and talking about their history to hopefully, ensure that we're bringing the right people in to the profession.
Mhm.
But, by and large now, once we onboard them, it's our job to ensure that they're healthy, physically and mentally. And, most recently we've taken some pretty good steps, I think, sort of grasped onto the, I'll call it employee wellness, staff wellness, officer wellness, where we've started a peer support program. We've had chaplaincy programs here. We have the ability for employees to seek out help through insurance programs that we provide the insurance, and they've got the ability to go talk to someone. But more importantly, most recently, I went into discussions with our union, and actually I've got it budgeted where we're going to have an annual voluntary, it's not mandatory, but it'd be voluntary, where officers can go to seek and discuss somebody that's a clinician, and the city will pay for that meeting with them to ensure that they've got that they're okay and that they have the ability to openly discuss things that are bothering them. And so that part of that officer wellness program, I'm just trying to make it as robust as possible. While we're in discussions with bringing yoga in here and talking about, in fact, I've got a meeting with a couple people after this to discuss yoga. There's agencies within our state that bring in yoga, and it's a holistic approach to ensuring that officers are both mentally and physically prepared for the daily grind that they're going through. So I'm hopeful that as I kind of transition out of here in the next few years, that we're going to leave our staff with a program that they're going to be proud of and have confidence in, to know that they can get the help that they need if they so desire.
All right. Well, this is great. I know that you've been very communicative on Facebook, and I would urge people to go to your page. I've followed you over the years, and I just marvel at your openness to the community, just you personally. And now you're pushing that to another level with openness about these issues that we're talking about today. So
Right.
follow you on Facebook for more answers. We're not going to get to everything today, but I do have a few other things that I think people are wondering. They've heard nationally these issues, and I want to kind of see, well, is that happening here? Let me just throw one at you. No-knock warrants, and I've heard no-knock warrants in drug cases shouldn't happen. And talk to us about that.
Never, a no-knock warrant's got to be signed by a judge. I've never even experienced one. I don't believe that they're even utilize no-knocks anymore in the state of Oregon, much less Yamhill County. So that's something that I've not ever even heard of. No-knocks are not, that doesn't happen here.
Well, okay. Glad to hear it right here today about our community. Uh, the budget is something people have been talking about. Just I hear commonly that the police department's budget is about a third of a city's budget, and our city just falls right into line with that. People have been talking about reallocating the funds that go to the police to take care of other social issues. Um, and now I know that a police definitely would be able to like make less home calls on homeless situations, mental health, uh, uh, domestic disputes, probably one of the scariest things you do. So what does that sound like to you?
Well, I talk with our officers, and officers will be completely fine with being taken out of the role of being a mental health professional. I mean, I've talked to you over the years, and I think you and I share the same opinion that the police have just generally been sort of a clearinghouse for all sort of community issues, and our staff would not have any problems with mental health calls going to a different source. That being said, and candidly, let me rewind. We are partnering already as a county with our County Health and Human Services, where they've got clinicians that are partnering with our officers and dealing with those that are in mental health crisis, trying to get them the intervention or at least plugged in, de-escalate things before they get worse. So we already have that program in there. And, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it'd be great if everybody wanted to engage in mental health services, but candidly, that's not who we primarily deal with. Those that we are primarily dealing with are those that are acting out in either criminal behavior or they're acting out in a violent manner. And if there's an organization that wants to take that on and they have the capacity and the ability and the training to do it, I'm all for it. I'm just saying that I would be, those calls are still going to be there, but those that have refused mental health treatment and don't want to be involved with a clinician. So we are thrust into that role to ensure, one, that whoever's going is safe, or a family member, because it's usually is a family dynamic, or if it's somebody on the street in our core acting out, it's called, and we're called to do it. And again, if we can get everybody in line to say, hey, you gotta go to that mental health treatment, I'm all for it, that we can get everybody plugged in. But the police, the defunding spiel that's kind of gone on is, let's get police out of that. Well, I'd love to be out of that. But candidly, I don't think society's going to, or citizenry or person, their individual rights are going to allow us to be completely extracted from those types of contacts.
Okay. So there's two pieces to this conversation I hear around the country. One is the relieve police of these burdens and, spend the money elsewhere. But the other piece is reform what police are doing. And I think that what comes to the top of the list is this list of 8 can't wait. And these are 8 reform initiatives, right, that are pretty widely spread. And there's a website that shows how your city is doing on those 8 things. They don't get down to sizes on this website. They don't do McMinnville, but they do Portland, and Portland is doing 5 of the 8. I just want to run down the list with you, if that's all right, and ask about how we do it here in McMinnville.
Yeah, that's great. And another, to our citizens that want to know a little bit more, we pushed a memo out. I pushed a memo out to our citizens that discussed these 8 policy recommendations that came out of the 8 Can't Wait campaign. And I've weighed in on them. I've given my initial sort of assessment, so to speak, on those specific policies. And, I will say, in my opinion, we hit 7 of the 8.
All right.
You can run down the list, but
sure,
the only one that we are not hitting is the de-escalation, or not the de-escalation, but the use of force continuum, I should say. And the reason we don't have a use of force continuum is because in roughly 2009, the state police, DPSST, I should say, pulled the thought pulled that the use of a continuum out and just used reasonable force necessary to get the job done, essentially. And then PERF came out and said it's not best practice. So that being said, let's run down the list. I'd be happy to talk about it.
Okay, great. Banned use of chokeholds and strangleholds.
Yep. So we don't train on chokeholds. It's not in our repertoire. We don't train on it. The only time you could use chokeholds is if deadly force is authorized. So you can use any sort of implement necessary if deadly force is authorized. You could use obviously your weapon. You can use but if you've got nothing else, they've taken your weapon. You have the ability to use that type of force only in deadly force situations, nothing less. And again, we don't train on it.
Requires de-escalation.
Right. So we train de-escalation in every scenario that we do. Defensive tactics, simunitions, our CIT training talks about de-escalation. So everything that we do, whether it's in training or on duty, de-escalation is a requirement if we can. Okay, so a lot of times the public are going to sort of dictate that based on their mannerisms and how aggressive they are. But de-escalation is a vital and crucial component of anything that MACPD does. We do preach de-escalation. It's in our training curriculum. You'll see it all over the place.
All right, all right. I had an experience once where I stepped out of a rental home that I owned, and someone had called in a call about suspicious activity, and I happened to fit the description. I had on a maroon jacket, and the police were responding to that unbeknownst to me, and I was on the sidewalk, and I got a big, "Hey, you! Yeah, you!" And I looked like I've never been talked to like that in my life. And I just, can you address that?
That's called, Ken, that's called command presence, getting somebody's attention. Verbal commands. Hey, you. Okay. Probably not, hey, how about, hey, sir, can I talk to you?
That would have worked better with me. I see an officer, I see him in the uniform, and I'm like, what's up, you know? But I just didn't work for me. So I just hope that maybe these things can be read better. And that's just me and my simple life, you know. I did have an experience where I felt like, wow, I did not feel good about that. That started out really bad.
Yeah.
Badly. All right, requires warning before shooting.
Yes. If our policy says if it's doable, you're required to give a warning.
Okay.
That we train on that in firearms training. Again, we train on that in taser. We'll give them taser warnings. We'll give them firearms warnings. Yeah, if the situation allows for it, yes, you're required to give a warning.
Okay. Duty to intervene, meaning an officer standing by is duty bound to intervene with another officer that is behaving against protocol.
You bet. Yes, there is a standard of conduct that we have for that. That's in our use of force policy. If somebody's using excessive force, we have a duty to intervene and stop that and report that.
Ban of shooting a moving vehicle.
Yes, it is. Our best practice is that is a last resort. It is banned unless you have exhausted all other means, like you cannot get out of the way, somebody's trying to run you over, etc. But it is highly discouraged and it is not advisable in our policy. And again, I ask you to go to our Facebook site, and I believe also our PD webpage has that information too, with specific verbiage.
Now, as I remember, we did have an incident of, I think, an officer shooting a moving vehicle right down on 3rd Street. And I think the person behind the wheel was killed. Do you remember that incident?
Nuh-uh.
Okay, maybe it was before your time. It was right there in the mechanic.
Years ago.
What's that?
Must have been 27 years ago before me.
Well, it was kitty corner from the new 1892 restaurant in the mechanics lot there. And somebody was headed toward the officer, and well,
no, we didn't shoot. I do recall that somebody. This was probably 10 years ago. Yeah, we didn't.
Okay. Yes.
We didn't.
Okay. Fire. My mistake. Let's see. Has use of force continuum.
We talked about that. Use of force continuum went away in 2009. We did have it in our policy when DPSST went away from that, and The subject matter experts said do away with the continuum because it's too sort of, it's so narrowly focused that you cannot, it says do this, do this, do this, do this. They went ahead and they did it, and it's now a reasonable amount of force necessary.
Okay, reasonable amount of force. Well, I'd like to pause on that one. One thing that I've heard is that when officers are convicted, not convicted, when they're indicted on a charge where they used excessive force in a situation, somebody ended up dead, and it will go to trial because the grand jury agreed and the DA agreed, and here it is. And so often we see that there's not a conviction because the bar is so high of reasonable use of force, and there's been a call to lower that bar to necessary use of force. Mm-hmm. And that's a kind of initiative that's going forward here.
Maybe something that's discussed in Salem, like I said, at the short session.
Okay.
With you off camera, but you know, reasonable amount of force. That is that's statutorily that Graham versus O'Connor is this measure for reasonable amount of force.
Okay, so that may change. We may see that change here.
Could. I'd be shocked if it was. But,
okay. Now that brings me up. What is one more thing? Requires comprehensive reporting, and you do that whenever somebody pulls a gun. If an injury is inflicted, that's reported.
Yes. Not if you, for the MACPD's policy, if you draw your weapon, if you unholster your weapon, that is not reportable as a use of force. Use of force, any injury is reportable to a person.
Okay, you draw your weapon, and you if you point the weapon at an individual, is that required reporting?
No, that's not
okay.
Not a required use of force under our policy. And I will say our policy, and I know that there's been some questions about how do we form policy. Well, we contract with Lexipol. You may have heard them. They're out of California. Mm-hmm. They have a whole bunch of lawyers, and they do a tremendous amount of policy work throughout the entire country. We have a policy manual that was specifically made for Oregon. We adopt those policies and then sort of mold them to fit MACPD. So if we don't have a specific, so a SWAT team, we don't have a SWAT team, we don't have a policy on that, but we are able to move or change, tweak policy a little bit so it fits our organization and our staffing allocations, that sort of thing.
All right, well, that's the 8 can't wait. I think, again, these questions are brought up around the country, and people are wanting, oh, you know, what's it like here at home?
You know, we have been, you know, Ken, we've been accredited for, 10 years now through the state. We were CLIA accredited back in the, the 90s. That's a very high level. I'm on the OAA board, the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. I see stuff coming past me in reports. MACPD does a really good job, and not only just through our accreditation problem to prove that we're doing things and that we have policies in order, but you have to, I just want to reiterate to our citizens, our policies and our practices, you're not dealing with a city or a town that has no policies. It's a policy manual that's has them and dusted off in 20 years. We go through our policies every year, probably bi-monthly, to go through when new policies are pushed out and decide whether or not that's something that we need to have. But by and large, our policy manual and our practices, we are in line with the best of the best here in the state.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. I want to ask you.
That's me gloating, though. That's me gloating.
Go ahead. I want to hit you with one more here at the end. It's kind of a two-parter. There's concern about officers that have been dismissed or have a record of overly aggressive behavior kind of being passed around from town to town. And then also involved in that is union protection of these individuals because that's their job, and they get people off when perhaps yourself would rather them not have been kept on the force. Can you talk to that whole continuum?
You bet. So like a database, I think you're going to see something come up in Salem in the short session. What's going to deal with like a local, a statewide database for officer discipline. That's something that's been that will come up to track those that have, and candidly, again, if we terminate somebody or somebody's discharged, we have to report that to DPSST, so their certifications are reviewed. They'll ask us for the entire packet. Not the personnel packet, but the some sort of internal affairs investigation. They'll get that information. So there are some checks and balances. What's really been sort of problematic, not just here in Oregon, but nationally, is that the arbiters' rulings, when officers or any staff for that matter, that are in a union or an association of some form, they're terminated and they're brought back through arbiters' rulings. And again, I think that you're going to see a tremendous groundswell of support for arbiter reform, which makes it more difficult for officers that are bad actors to be brought back through arbiters' decisions that maybe don't align. So if, say, I, as the chief, follow everything, it's a righteous termination, so to speak. That an arbiter doesn't just have the ability, well, they're close to their retirement, let's just let them retire. But that's not what our profession needs, not at all. Our profession needs the best of the best, needs the clean ones, and we need to do away with the dirty ones. And candidly, again, I will tell you that our police association has worked with the city and my office to make sure that sometimes when we've had bad actors, they've helped them understand that they need to go, that there needs to be a separation, and they have assisted us in making sure that that happens. That being said, sometimes arbiters, sometimes unions do decide to grieve it just to grieve it. I'll give you an example. Our local police association doesn't have this say in whether or not they're going to protect an officer that's been discharged. It's up to the Teamsters now and their union and their representatives and their attorneys as to whether or not they're going to fight it. So in that case, even though a bad actor might not want to be, our entire association might say that person didn't need to come back. The Teamsters Association, or the Teamsters Union, excuse me, they will and have fought for officers to be reinstated. So we need to, I understand officers' rights in that we can't capriciously just say somebody needs to go. We need to follow the rule. We need to follow the procedures. We need to follow a contract. But when a righteous termination has been made, and you get an arbiter's decision that is not in alignment with community values, and we are forced to bring them back, that's when it becomes very problematic. Problematic not only because we have somebody that's in the uniform wearing the badge, but also because we've got a minimum number of officers. So say somebody lies, they get terminated, they get brought back, they can't be a police officer in whole. They're not a whole police officer. They can't go to court and testify if they're on a Brady list. So again, there does need to be, and I see it coming in this short session, that there may be some changes to the way arbitration goes in public safety, specifically police.
Well, that is good news. Matt, our time's up. Thank you so much for being here. I will say, I know you have an appointment with Leslie Anderson and Rose Schneider of Boho Yoga.
Oh, yeah.
And I was with them on a conversation about race on Wednesday. And that's when they mentioned they're going to be talking to you today at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
And, you will feel better after just talking to them. They are amazing people, and the yoga is a big yes. So I hope that works out.
I do too. They came to me and they wanted to talk about offering that to our staff, and as part of a wellness program, seriously, again, considering something like that we can provide to our staff. But I hope so.
I think it can make a big difference. Well, in just the mental health and how people are feeling, I just think that's a wonderful offer they've made. Well, Matt, again, Chief Scales, thank you so much for being here, for your many years of service to the community, and let's talk soon. I think there's going to be more to talk about.
All right. Have a great one, Ken.
All right. You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.